All right, guys, welcome back to the Performance Playbook podcast. Today we've got Lucy Westlake. How we doing?
Doing great. It's a nice Sunday, trying to relax a bit. Yeah.
Hell yeah. I actually was told I have a manager here at Purdue, and she told me to look you up because I was talking to her about getting more really interesting and thrilling women on the podcast because I didn't want to just have, men that were on the podcast that have done, very interesting and incredible things. And then she sends me your profile, and I was like, damn, let's go. So for the viewers that are watching, can you give us a little background on who you are?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm super pumped. Thank you for reaching out because I'm really excited. I love sharing my story and trying to inspire people. Yeah, that's one of my big goals. So thank you. But yeah, I'm a mountaineer. That's like what I'm most known for. The like most kind of like known mountain I've done is Mount Everest. That kind of is what, gets people's attention. But I've been climbing since I was seven. Lots of mountains. I've been working on doing the seven summits. So that's the tallest mountain in each continent. Been climbing a lot internationally lately. And I'm also in college right now. So I'm a runner at the University of Southern California. I do track and cross country. So that's a good amount of my time. Yeah, fight on. That's a lot of my time right now. So yeah, that's kind of like my sports background.
Oh yeah. And so, because I saw that, and that was you were the youngest American woman to summit Mount Everest.
Yes, that's correct. I did it when I was 18, so about a year and a half ago, and
Yeah.
it was an amazing experience. I could talk for a while about it.
Hell yeah. Well, that's the goal. I do want to first just lay us the track to you getting there. So it's you started at seven. Is that because of the parents, or you just had a natural urge to go? What did that look like?
A combination. My parents always supported me a ton, and they were key in getting me to Everest, and still are like a big part of why I'm able to climb. But yeah, I started when I was seven doing state high pointing. So that's climbing the tallest mountain in every state. And
Mm,
beforehand, my family, we weren't like mountaineers. My parents weren't mountaineers. We lived in Louisville, Kentucky at that time. So no like mountains around or anything like that. But we just loved like traveling. We loved the outdoors, adventure, and we'd go on these awesome like road trips as a family. So that's kind of what state high pointing kind of like came into my life, and mountaineering came from that because at first it was just like hikes, like small hikes, because not all states have huge mountains in them. A lot of them are, just hikes. So that was really fun. But then the mountains kept getting bigger and bigger. And when I was 11 is when I really started learning like glacier mountaineering skills, like how to use the ice axe and crampons and walk in a rope team. That was on Mount Rainier. So that was like the
mm.
first big mountain I did when I was 11. And that's when I really was like, okay, like this is something I love to do. I want to try to do all 50 state high points. And so I did that. It took a little while to get Denali, the one in Alaska, just because
Mm.
that's one of the most difficult mountains in the world, a really hard mountain. Um, so in trying to do Denali and training for that, I started doing the seven summits. Like I went to Kilimanjaro in Africa, I went to Mount Elbrus in Europe, and then I did Denali, and then afterwards Aconcagua, which is the tallest one in South America. And then that led me. The next one I did was Mount Everest. So it was kind of like that trajectory of like, just building your way up, learning the skills you need, getting the prior experience you need
Yeah.
to be able to do something like Everest.
Yeah, that's unreal. I start to think about it's like there's so many pieces, like to a sport, right? Like there's a good amount of pieces. You have like the strength training, you have the recovery, you have like the sports specific like knowledge that you need to know and technique. And then you look at something like what you're doing that takes it to a whole nother level because you need to know how to like essentially climb. I don't know if you had to do like any sort of like actual climbing, like bouldering esque climbing, but I mean, mountaineering, like there's I mean, you could tell us, but there's essentially like 8, 9, 10 pieces that you have to be like very good at so you don't die. What are kind
Hmm.
of like the pieces to it? I know you talked about using the ice pick. What about what other things, other aspects that we might be missing?
Yeah, every mountain is so different. So, like, you go into, some mountains might be like super technical rock climbing. Some mountains might be like more of like glacial traverse, or like, vertical glacier where you do have to like use those ice tools. So a lot of, the mountains that I've climbed have been a wide variety. In the 50 state high points, I did them all in the summer. So for the most part, it was just glacier traverse. Like there was no like vertical glacier climbing except for a bit on Denali. Um, and yeah, that was like my favorite part. I loved like the kind of like more technical, like vertical things. It's just like super interesting and challenging. There was one mountain in it's I think it's Idaho's tallest mountain, but it could be Montana's. Get them mixed up. But that had some rock climbing at the top,
Okay.
but not like a ton of rock climbing in those. And then also like the Seven Summits, they have kind of a variety. Like there's lots like scrambling type of bouldering, but nothing like super like climbing heavy, where you actually like really need to know like rock climbing. But Everest was pretty technical with the ice, more ice climbing. You do have fixed lines going up, but you do like climb vertically, so you need those crampons so that your feet, so you can basically like walk up that like vertical ice, or across the vertical ice, and then you have like an ascender, so you can like ascend on this rope that basically keeps you safe. You have your ice axe. Yeah, it gets a little bit. It was definitely a little bit more serious up there. And
Yeah.
K2 is definitely the most technical mountain I've done, and that was this past summer. Just lots of like vertical steep stretches and a mix between like rock and ice. So it's just like something that's hard to like switch in between when you have crampons on.
Yeah. Did you, since you've done so many of these like pretty intense trails, especially with you being so young, did you have a lot of like pushback? Because I don't know, do you need to have like permits to do a lot of these hikes?
Yeah, a lot of them do. I mean, almost all of them require some sort of permits to do. And there wasn't a ton of like pushback until like Mount Rainier and Denali and some of those bigger mountains. Like when it's just hiking, it's totally fine. But then when it gets into that mountaineering, like on Mount Rainier, we really had to like push to get, an 11-year-old on the mountain. And Denali was even harder because I reached out to these guide companies and I was like, I want to climb this mountain. And they're like, no, like we don't take anyone younger than 18. And I was 13 at the time. So they made me, I had to go all the way to Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. Because they wanted me to climb another mountain over 19,000 feet to like
Mm.
prove my body could handle altitude. So that, that's what brought me over there. So I had to go all the way to Africa just to like kind of prove that. And then I had to build my own team. So they wouldn't like put me on a team because they thought I'd be like a potential liability to other clients. So I had to like reach out to people, just like emailing and like stuff like that, and trying to find people that would climb with me. So that was just, yeah, really hard to just get on the mountain. And there's been a few other instances of that, like on Aconcagua, we'd like hire a lawyer when we were down there to
Really?
get the permits. So yeah, there has been some pushback for sure. But now that I'm like over that 18 threshold, it's pretty smooth sailing from
Okay.
here on out,
Do
hopefully.
you are you making so like you were explaining it? I didn't know you had to have a team. Per location, is it a new team or is it just the same team that you have now that's consistently hitting all these locations with you?
It varies a lot. Like actually on Everest and K2, my two most recent ones, it was just me and my Sherpa. So there wasn't really that team that you had to have. Um, but that's just because like there's fixed lines, so you don't need to rope up to other people. But on a mountain like Denali, it's some like there's very few fixed lines, so you need to have a team of at least like three, maybe like four or five people so you can all rope together and like keep each other safe. So and then also there's a lot of weight. You have to carry your all your own weight on Denali. So that is like it's easier if you can split the group gear between more people.
Yeah.
So that's why I needed a team for that. But I've never really climbed, like I haven't climbed with those people since. It's pretty much different, like every single mountain, except for my dad, was my climbing partner since I was really young, and he's been on every mountain with me, almost every mountain with me. And for K2 on Everest, he didn't go to the summit, but he went to base camp
Okay.
and dropped me off there. So yeah, so he's been a big part of my climbing life.
Even getting to base camp though is pretty hard. Like that's not just a walk in the park too, right?
No, not at all. On Everest, it's base camp's around 17,000 feet, so that's 3,000 higher feet than anything we have in the continental US. Like you're
Yeah.
way above Mount Rainier or anything like that, Mount Whitney. So yeah, it's challenging, and it's not like technical or anything like that. At least the base camp treks I've been on have never been technical. They've been hiking, but they have been hiking at like a very high elevation. So yeah, they're difficult to get to for sure. But they're so I love the base camp checks. Like they're usually just very beautiful and like pretty laid back, but like still, challenging, and you're just surrounded by this gorgeous nature.
Yeah. When you're so like each trip, I know they're pretty different, but is there kind of like a consistency of like how long it takes you? Like Everest, was it like 3, 4 days to get to the summit? Denali 3, 4 days. Like when you're starting to like push that, are they around the same amount of time it takes to summit?
They're pretty similar. At least K2 and Everest and like a lot of the 8,000-meter peaks that are in like, Pakistan, India, China, Nepal. Those are all very similar. Where it takes about a week to get up to base camp, and then from actual climbing wise, from base camp to the top is usually like around 4 days. Um, but it usually takes around a month at least, at like a minimum to climb. Just because you wait at base camp a bit to acclimatize, and then you have to go on one rotation up and back down, to, get your body even more acclimatized. And then you wait, rest for a weather window. And if you can do it fast, like on Everest, we had great weather. Like my body was feeling amazing, hit the right weather windows, and I was able to do the whole expedition in 27 days. But somewhere like K2, it I was on the mountain for about 40 days just because we were just waiting and wait. The weather was just horrible. We were just stuck at base camp for like 2 weeks in our tents.
Damn.
It was insane. So it just like it depends, but yeah, usually it's about a week up to base camp and like 4 days of actual climbing to the
Yeah.
summit. And then somewhere on like Denali, where it's like more of like just a consistent climb, there's not really that base camp style. It took 3 weeks in total to go up and down.
Okay.
So that was a long haul.
That's actually 10,000 times longer than I expected. I thought I was like, okay, I totally forgot about the like you accumulating to that like that height because it's base camp. What'd you
Hmm.
say it was 17,000?
Yeah, 17,000 for
17,000.
Everest. And it was around that for Pakistan, um, for K2 as well.
Unreal. And so it's like you get up there.
Yeah.
Are you doing any sort of like training with the people that are kind of like living there that will end up taking you up? Are those is that what the Sherpa is like kind of a guide up to the summit?
Hmm. Yeah, a Sherpa's a guide that's born like in the Himalayas.
Okay.
So it's also like since they're in a caste system, it's like a certain like class of people, and it's kind of like passed down through, like family lines. But now it's a lot more lenient as to like who can become Sherpas. It's not so like strict caste system. It's more like it's become more a term for just guides, like mountain guides born in the Himalayas. Um,
Okay.
and that's like you have to have like a Sherpa going up Everest. It's a like a law, like it's a rule that you have to have a Sherpa, even like if you're a super experienced mountain guide and could like technically get up to the top by yourself. Like it's just like a requirement.
Okay. And so when you're at base camp for a lot of these places, are they doing consistent testing on you or are they just kind of checking up on you? Hey, are you acclimating well? What does that look like when you're at a base camp?
Yeah, it's honestly not a lot of communication. It's more, yeah, and there's no like formal test or anything like that. There is a pulse oximeter, which it measures like the amount of oxygen like saturation that you're getting, which I don't know like exactly the science behind it, but it's basically like how well your body's acclimatizing. Like here at like sea level, you should be at like 99, 100% of like the oxygen absorption. And then it could be like 80%, 70%, even 60%, although that's like kind of a bad measure there. Like at 60%, you're probably feeling very bad.
Mm,
But that's like a way that they can measure it. But usually I haven't really seen that much on Everest or K2. It was more just like, yeah, like how you're feeling. And then when you go up, if you're like super slow or just like kind of like not there, like mentally, like you're just like can't balance well or making a lot of mistakes, like those are all signs of altitude sickness. So you can really tell like when someone's, like shouldn't go up anymore. And there's also like usually signs of like coughing, things like that, like a wet cough, because the fluid, like altitude sickness is either fluid in your lungs or fluid in your brain.
oof.
So you can kind of tell the symptoms of that, as someone's going up.
Yeah. And then just the fix for that is to just go back down slowly from where you are. Is that really all it is?
Actually, as fast as you can. Just
Oh, really?
yeah, the only like real cure for altitude sickness is just descending.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's like the fastest. And then, if it you can there's medicine you can take, things like that, but the one like sure easy cure is just going down. Which sounds easy, but then when you have people up there that are like, they paid like thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to be there and things like that, it gets a little more complicated. People don't want to throw that away.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And then so you go down. Has this ever happened to you? Have you experienced this before?
Yeah, I almost everyone experiences, honestly, I think everyone experiences at least some mild
A
forms of
form of it.
altitude sickness, like loss of appetite, headaches, things like that, like dehydration. Almost everyone gets that when you're going to that high, like no matter what. But those aren't like dangerous. Those are more like the beginning signs. Um, I've only had altitude sickness where it caused me to actually have to turn around in an expedition once. And that was on Aconcagua in South America. I went two times actually, because the first time I didn't summit because of the altitude sickness. And it came on so suddenly. It was crazy. I was like feeling amazing. We were going up really fast because we were trying to fit the expedition in my winter break for school. And since we had to hire the lawyer to like get on the mountain, it made it such short of a time for the expedition. So we were like trying to go up as fast as we could. And me and my dad, it was just the two of us. We were feeling great. And then we get to like summit day, and that night we get up at like 10 p.m. and I don't know what happened, but that night the altitude just hit me and I like could not walk. It was
Oh, wow.
it was crazy. I felt so bad. I just like felt like I had to throw up and was super dizzy and lethargic. It was awful.
Damn. And then were you just woke up and then you're like, "Hey, this is really bad," and so the whole group had to go down, or was it just like one other person that went down with you?
It was just me and my dad climbing that mountain.
Oh,
So just yeah, me and my dad just went way back. Yeah.
okay. Damn. All right. Well, so then one piece that I was super interested in is like the training, and I don't know what this looks like for you, but maybe it's just you being in track is kind of your training, but like what would be the pieces that you took training wise when it came to getting ready for Everest? And obviously like one obvious piece is like you've done all of these other, huge summits, but like on a training aspect, let that be like cardiovascular, strength training. Like what did that look like for you?
Yeah, the main, I'd say definitely like the key is just climbing other mountains, like getting your body really used to adjusting to altitude, and just knowing mentally as well, like what's about to happen, like how awful you're gonna feel, and just like be prepared for that. So that was like a huge part, the main part. But then like obviously physically that matters as well. Like you have to be very physically fit to be able to summit a mountain like that. And because I've never lived near other mountains, like unfortunately I can't use like climbing mountains near my house as like a training. So I've just used my running as training like throughout my life. And it's always been enough, so I've never felt the need to like have to add something. But being in like a college sport, they keep you on a pretty strict schedule, like running once or twice a day, and then the weightlifting like 3 times a week. So that's been all I need. But I really want to get into more of like the technical side of mountaineering now. It's something that like since K2 I've been really just like feeling the call to do that. So now I'm really trying to incorporate at least going like 2 times a week to the climbing gym, and getting more of those like that rock climbing skills that I want to hopefully take to the mountains at some point.
Okay, so then I guess that kind of fits for people maybe looking into that is, hey, you should look into some form of like cardiovascular training, let that be like running
Hmm.
or something to kind of build your capacity. And then strength training, you feel like that probably aided pretty well in just the muscular strength of like, I guess one thing I was thinking about, and I was going to ask this, even though if you're going on other mountains with huge packs, like that's rucking, right? It's like hiking with
Hmm.
weight. Do you think that'd be pretty beneficial if someone didn't have the utility of a mountain next to them?
Definitely, definitely. My dad always was he ran in college, but he really doesn't like running now. So he used to like get on the treadmill or like the Stairmaster with like a backpack and like
Okay.
with heavy weight in it, and that definitely really helped. And yeah, I think like the main thing in my opinion, is like that cardiovascular strength. Because when you're up at that altitude, like your body's gonna have to be efficient at that, and like you're climbing for hours on end. So really getting like that endurance cardiovascular system, like you don't really need to be able to like run a 400 meter super fast to be able to climb a mountain. That doesn't really translate. But just that, like going out for like an hour and a half run, like something like that, like when you're really like stressing that endurance, or like a bike or swim, that's like kind of like where that key comes in. And then also, yeah, the weightlifting. I mean, you are gonna have to carry a pretty heavy pack at some point. So really, like that leg strength and that back strength and core to be able to carry the backpack is super helpful. And just like all around body strength. But I'd say, you're not using your arms too much. Except for when you're like, if you're doing more technical routes and you're like needing to like get in those ice tools, that's when you do need to have that upper body strength. So it just kind of depends on the routes you're trying to do. Like obviously if you're, doing like a really technical climb and you need rock climbing skills, like you're gonna need that upper and lower body and to have those skills. But just like purely like a mountain like Everest, it's more of that like legs, back, core strength and that really great endurance.
Okay. Yeah, it's because I just start to I kind of am in the strength and conditioning side of things, and I start to like try to wrap my brain around it because I feel like even rucking might not even be enough because how low was like what were the temperatures once you're starting to get like really high up?
Mm. Yeah, temperatures drop to, I mean, at night, like negative 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the day. It varies a lot just based on like, the weather changes like that up there. So it's like
Yeah.
it's wind, like wind's a huge factor, things like that. But you're looking at around like 0 to like negative 10 degrees. So it's chilly. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's another aspect, like having enough like body mass to like insulate you. They do have amazing like they have amazing suits now, like high altitude, like full body suits that keep you so warm. Like I would not feel cold at all on summit day on Everest or K2,
Yeah.
because of those suits. So they do really have the technology for that these days. But I remember when I was younger and I was super super skinny, like I would like I would just be miserable. It would be absolutely miserable because I was just constantly freezing. And I would like swear every time I took my boots off, I would be like, please don't have frostbite. Like I thought my toes were just gonna be all black down there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy the cold.
Yeah. I guess my point with that, like we're starting to hit a pretty heavy winter right now in Indiana. It's like when you walk outside and it's that cold and you are in the negatives, it takes your breath away. And then so you have a
Hmm.
heavy pack on. And I guess where I was the you have so much gear. Like you're not just wearing a backpack. You have like this full suit on. You're trudging through snow. It's like you can only train so much of that. And I feel like maybe you lightly brought it up, but like the other piece of that is the mental side of just when it gets
Hmm.
really, really hard, just kind of putting your head down and just keep walking, follow that line and just keep pushing up. Did you notice that was kind of like a
Hmm.
really big push for you was more of that mental side?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I always say mountaineering is like 80% mental. Like I've seen like people that I'm like, no way can they like get up a mountain, and they're just mental toughness. Like my dad is an example. He doesn't train whatsoever. He is like sit on the couch type of dad, but his mental toughness is like insane. Like he just pushes and pushes, and you can do that to get to the top of mountains. Like it's crazy how much mental like the mental side matters because especially on the long expeditions that are like a month or plus, like or like 3 weeks plus, like you're gonna be in a tent, like you're gonna be dirty, you're gonna be feeling uncomfortable, you are gonna like have those conditions where you just can't train for some things. And at that point, yeah, it's all mental. You really have to like be an optimist and just tell yourself you can, and break it down. Like just put one foot in front of the other. Sometimes that's all you can do, or all you can think about doing, because the rest is just too overwhelming.
Mm,
So it's a big
yeah.
part of it for sure.
Well, so then with that being said, now I'd be interested to kind of hear the journey of you getting through Everest. And I did want to kind of just tap on this before you even, tell us a lot of this story of you summiting Everest. But like, I feel like the statistic of people dying on Everest is like incredibly high. I don't know if you have that on hand or if you even know about it, but like I feel like I've heard about it and I'm like it's
Yeah.
because someone's brought that like would you ever try to like summit Everest and every time I'm like absolutely not. Like I feel like the stakes are so high and it's just like I like backpacking and stuff like that, but when you take it
Hmm.
to the extreme, like that's the Olympics I feel like of mountaineering and backpacking and like you're taking it to the absolute extreme. Was that something you had in mind when you were starting this whole journey for yourself?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I was worried about going in for sure. Like just when you like look it up, like those numbers are I don't have them like off the top of my mind, but it's a high percentage. But then when you actually like kind of get into that world, you realize that mountaineering has changed so much recently. Like an insane amount just in like the past like 5 years even. And it's gone from like death counts being super super high, like like one every other person like dying on these mountains, to it being super low. Like I mean, not like there are still deaths, and it depends on the year and everything. Like when I was up there was actually no deaths the year I was there, but then like this past year there was an accident up there, so there were some deaths. So it's it's definitely still risky, but when you just like search up that like number, that's like overall throughout all time, where like the mountain was super undeveloped and like people were just like going up with nothing, and obviously like that's a lot more dangerous and scary than what it is now, where it's just more developed. But sometimes it is like I'm like I need to like kind of like put it in perspective, because when you see all these other people and when you're at base camp, like everyone's like they're mountaineers, like they're like this is normal type of thing. And you do have to remember like no, this is like something that's very, it is very risky. You are putting your life on the line, and when everyone's kind of like doing it together, it almost seems kind of like normal. um but yeah, the death in the mountains is something that every mountaineer like should really have a good grasp on, and like know their comfort levels, and like what they're willing to risk and to like get to the summit, like there's the mountains are always going to require at least some sacrifice, but you kind of have to like know when it's too much and when it's when you can keep going. It's a thin line, and it's often like super blurry and hard to like understand the situation. So yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. So with the journey then, what do you think a lot of people don't really know or understand about summiting Everest and like what actually goes into that? What do you think they miss, or they'd be like, "Oh my God, like I never thought you'd have to do X, Y, or Z to throughout this hike."
I think it's honestly like the little things that just add up to make it like super uncomfortable. Like everyone knows like it's a grind. Like you're hiking for hours on end. I mean, it is like probably longer than you would expect. Like summer days is like 16 hours. Like you're getting up at 10 in the morning, and you're not getting back until like later in the like mid-afternoon to the camp. So it's or sorry, you're leaving at like 10 at night. Like you're leaving like
10
10
p.m.
p.m. from
Okay.
your tent and like yeah, and hiking. So it's like it's a grind. But I feel like a lot of people kind of like know that or like have that in their mind where it's like they grind, but then you don't realize like when you get in that tent, like there's so much to do. You have to like make a tent site. Like on Denali, we had to like you get to camp and you're like halfway done with the day. Like you have to pack your tent site, you have to like shovel, like level everything out. We cut like ice blocks to make like almost like a wall around for protection. And then you get out, you set up your tent, get out your sleeping bag, and then you have to like cook your own food. So you have to get the snow and melt the snow for water to boil your food in, and then the food is like not that good because it's in a bag. Like it's like the freeze dried food. So it's just like all those little things, like just mentally just wear you down so much. And one thing that has been really hard for me recently is just like the loneliness you feel up there too. Um, because when I was like out climbing with my dad when he was like summiting with me, I always kind of had that tie to home. So at least it felt kind of like comfortable. And I would miss like my family and friends, but I would at least have him. But now when I'm like up there, without him, I miss home a lot more. And when it's like that month-long expedition, like in the middle of the summer, I'm like I like go right from college usually and just like go to an expedition, and I'm like I want to go see my friends. Like I just think about what they're doing and stuff, and it's lonely. Like I'm like, gosh, like why am I doing this again? So I think that's another part that kind of gets overlooked is just like that emotional battle as well. Like that's been the hardest parts for me, honestly, is just like waiting at K2 for a month, being like, I want to get up and down this mountain. And always have to like put it in perspective and be like this is what I like want to do all year. Like when I'm not on this mountain, I'm gonna be missing this. So yeah, that the emotional battle is like very tough.
Yeah. Okay, so then walk us through. Let's get this kind of this map out of your journey to summiting this mountain, this ginormous mountain. What's some big pieces that we should know, and what are some good markers? Give us kind of like a relapse of this entire trip.
Okay. Well, it started out where I took the semester, I graduated a semester early from high school. So that was like in itself kind of challenging to do. But got the semester off and I went in April of my senior year. And I mean, even traveling over to Nepal is like such a long flight, especially with like all the gear you have to bring is crazy. But once you get like all the logistics sorted out, which is like 3 or 4 days, like organizing and everything, you actually like fly in this tiny little glacier plane um, on to like you go to this little town called Lukla, and that's like the start where a lot of treks start. And then from there, it was me and I had a group of 10 people with me. And it was just friends and family. Like, we put it out to whoever wanted to come with us for the base camp trek, wanted to come with me and my dad up to base camp, could. So there, it was like a 2 week maybe even less, like 12-day thing where you hiked up for 8 days and then back down for 4 days, and just dropped me off at base camp. So it was really cool. We got a great group to do that with us. So we all just started hiking together, and it was absolutely beautiful scenery, like this amazing woods. So for a few days we were like following this river, going across these like hanging bridges, and this like woods. And then it got to more of like that alpine, like you kind of got up to elevation, and eventually we made it to base camp. It was a really smooth hike, like a great trek. One of definitely the most beautiful trek I've ever been on, for sure. But yeah, it was hard at the end. Like you get to 17,000 and you're at a decent elevation up there. So and then at base camp I had to say goodbye to everyone. So that was a really, talking about that emotional like mental battle. That was a hard step right there, just saying goodbye. And then I had the mountain ahead. So that's when like you go up to the base of the mountain, and then right after that you're going in the Khumbu ice fall, which is like one of the most technical, probably the most technical, like dangerous part of the mountain, which is just like right after base camp. And it's basically this series of just crevasses that you have to climb up, over, down. You have to cross like ladders across crevasses. And crevasses are basically like giant holes in the mountain, essentially, like these deep cracks from like the glacier sliding. So it's intense. It's a really long day, like 8 hours just through that, up to camp one. So I did like my first rotation through that all the way to camp three and back. And there's four camps to the top. So there's like four camps and then you summit. So I went up to camp three, went back down, rested a little while. We were looking for a good summit window because you have to wait, actually for there's called the rope fixing team that actually puts in the lines all the way to the summit, where you like take your ascender and you like climb up those lines, which is just kind of like it's a new thing like in the past few years that's made the mountain a lot safer, also easier to climb, uh, which is kind of like controversial. Like some people are like, no, I want to do it myself, type of thing. But everyone that I know that's climbed like in the past like 10 years, has used the fixed lines. But yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons I want to go more towards technical mountaineering, because I'm like want to explore what I can do myself.
Mm.
Um, but anyway, there's yeah, so we did the first rotation, went super smoothly. I felt really good. I we didn't use any oxygen on that rotation. But starting at camp three is around where people start using oxygen. So after that, I was going to. But I was only had to wait at base camp for like 4 days. And then the rope fixing team got the ropes fixed all the way to the summit, and just like everyone, not everyone, but like most of the mountain like headed out. Like when there's like a summit window, everyone in the mountains like go go go. Like it's like this big like herd trying to summit, because there's usually only like 3 or 4 days out of the whole year that are like that people summit, unless you're doing it out of season, which is like a whole other beast. So yeah, so I went, and it was just super smooth all the way to the top. The one day that was like was challenging is we went up to camp three, and then the we were planning to go up to camp four the next day, and the winds were so strong that we couldn't go up, and we actually had to go back down to camp two.
Mm.
And I was really like scared and kind of frustrated that we because I didn't know if we were gonna get another chance to go, to the summit. Like that, you never know. That might have been like the end of the expedition. Um, and then, we were one day lower on food, stuff like that. We lost those resources. But luckily the next day was nice. We were able to go up to camp three, then camp four. And then, I mean, summit day is really challenging. Um, it's definitely that, and the day where you go through the Khumbu ice fall are the most challenging. Getting up to camp three is also, really hard. There's a very steep section, where you're going up some fixed lines. But yeah, on summit day, you just like I remember like looking at the day before, like when we got up to camp four, and I was like, no way, that's one day. Like it looked like the whole mountain was just ahead of us. But then the dark is sometimes nice because we started at 9 o'clock at night. So the dark, like you couldn't see what was ahead. So it was just like that one foot in front of the other type of thing. And that was almost like better because then you don't see the looming mountain ahead of you, all that you have to climb. You just see your next few steps. And then right when we were like crossing Hillary Step, which is like an hour before the summit, like the last like hard push, like it's a little technical there. The sun came up and I was like, I know I can do it. And we made it to the top. It was amazing. And then back down was super smooth as well because at the top's only halfway. You got to get back down. So that also was what went really well, really
Yeah.
smoothly.
Okay, so then now we're going to take this in sections because I feel like I have questions on each piece. So when you started crossing, and when you say ladders, I feel like maybe people are going to like misrepresent what these ladders potentially look like. Is this a ladder that looks like I'm, getting ready to put onto my roof? Is it that type of ladder? Is it a little bit, more sturdy? What does this ladder look like that you're kind of climbing over?
It honestly does look like a ladder you just put on your roof, which is kind of like scary. Like it looks like a metal, like it's just like a metal like roof ladder almost that is like yeah, and the rungs are like a lot closer. That's like one thing that's different. Where you can like put your foot, like your toe on one and then like your heel on it so you can actually like walk on it. Like you don't have to like balance as much. But yeah, it's like these ladders and then there's usually like ropes on either side that you can like hold on to, but it's still like super precarious. Like, if you like lean too far one way or the other way, like you're falling in this crevasse. So it's scary for sure. And with a big backpack on, that's like that just makes it so much harder because you're like really like trying to carry this backpack and then also like in this weird like the crampons are like literally like claws coming out of your boots. So it's like that just makes it super hard to balance as well because it's not like you have that flat shoe. It's like these weird claws. So it's just yeah, the going across the ladders is a bit scary, but I also am like such an adrenaline junkie that I'm like I love going across the ladders, but I also like it, yeah, it's a little it's a little iffy sometimes.
Is that so? Do you think that's where most people start to struggle? Because I mean, I'm assuming you're walking pretty slow and controlled over this ladder, but while you're doing that, it's not like the ladder's just it's see through. You're looking straight down into darkness, right? Like it's kind
Yeah,
of a terrifying walk, and you're doing that multiple times
it
to
is.
pass through this section.
Yeah, definitely the Khumbu Ice Falls. Some people say like that's the hardest part of the whole expedition for them. And I could definitely see that. Like just the fear factor. Like if you're afraid of heights at all, that would be very challenging. And then if you're not like super like comfortable like using an ice axe, using crampons, climbing up ropes like that, because there's a lot of vertical in the Khumbu Icefall just because it's like you're climbing up a wall of like a crevasse and then it's like flat maybe and then it goes like straight down like we have to rappel. So it's like and it changes every day. It's crazy. Like when you're sleeping at base camp, you can literally hear the ice moving above you. Uh, it's such a freaky thing. And every day there's these people called ice doctors that are hired by the companies, and they go in to the Sherpas who go into the ice fall and find the route every single day. Because things could have changed, and they carry ladders with them. So if they, a crevasse opens up, they put the ladder across. They carry ropes, all these things. So they have to like do a lot of yeah, it's that's probably like the most dangerous job on the mountain, honestly. Just because yeah, you have to go into like unknown terrain and make a path through it. So that's definitely one of like the scariest, hardest parts of the mountain is the Khumbu Ice Fall, and where a lot of casualties have occurred.
Okay. And again, I'm still trying to picture all of these little pieces that might just seem obvious to you, but for everyone else, this isn't a straight path. Like you're just trudging through
Mm-mm.
a bunch of snow. Like is this like a foot or two of snow that you're kind of like trudging through, or is this like what does it look like? What's this path look like?
Yeah, it's definitely not a straight path. The snow, honestly, there's not in the ice fall, like it's mostly ice that you're on, or like a thin pack of snow.
Okay.
It's usually not like feet of snow. Like if that
Okay.
happens, it's usually more near the top of the mountain. Especially if a lot of wind blows on it or like snow like fell recently. That does happen, but not really in the ice fall. That's more like you're climbing on like ice and like hard packed snow. But it's like, yeah, I mean, it literally looks like a minefield of just like up and down and like like pinnacles of ice everywhere. So you're like you don't when you look ahead, like you can not see the path at all. Like you don't even know where it goes. You just have to like follow like where you are in that moment, like where the rope is leading, or where the footprints are.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like if I was by myself, I would have gotten lost so fast. Like Mingma's my Sherpa, and I did Everest and K2 with him, and like
Okay.
that he like knows it super well. He's summited Everest 16 times. So even though it changes all the time, and he's never been in the ice fall as it is like that day, he at least like knows where the path typically is, like how the ice doctors, like how their kind of like thought process works, so he can find it a lot more easily. But even he sometimes is like like has to like look around and like try to figure out where it goes, because it's such a crazy, yeah, the Kumbu Ice Fall is a crazy place.
Okay, and so from the Kumbu Ice Falls is the second part, which was what was that part called? Just base camp two?
Yeah, yeah. Base camp, or a base camp is like the main, like that's where like 2,000 people like hang out.
Yeah.
And like that's like home base in the very like safe part of the mountain, like before the
Okay.
glacier.
Yeah.
And then you go up to Camp One, which is right above the Khumbu Ice Fall.
Okay, camp one.
So basically like you hike through it, Camp One, and then to Camp Two is like the easiest day. So it's like pretty flat and a short day. And when you go up actually to summit, we skipped Camp One, like we just went from base camp to Camp Two,
Okay.
because it is like a 2 hour hike, like on like a decently flat terrain up to Camp Two, and then Camp Three is challenging to get up to. That was my most challenging day on the rotation to acclimatize. When I went up there at first before the summit push, that one was, I was just like tired, and the altitude, like at that point you're at like 20,000 feet, so you're really feeling the altitude. And yeah, it's like flat and then just gets so steep. It just like almost feels like straight up to Camp Three.
Yeah.
It's crazy, yeah.
So what do these camps look like? Is the camp literally just a section that's flat on the mountain that you guys, or at least these people have kind of picked for you? And is that consistently changing too?
Yes, it does. It definitely changes, season to season, and it also changes like sometimes like week to week. And they're the flattest part, people can find, which sometimes is not flat at all. On the Camp Three is like literally just like in the side of this like really steep slope, and then people have just like cut in to like the snow and like trying to make a flat-ish part. But I remember like on K2 this past summer, I was on we were in a tent, and it was like on the edge of like this like complete cliff. Like there
Oh,
was just a few rocks like kind of sectioning us off from like the cliff, and then the other side was like this 50-degree slope down, and our tent, like half of it was like Mingo was like, we can't sleep on that side of the tent. Like it's like you're gonna roll down the mountain if you're on that side. So that's the scariest tent I've ever been on in. But yeah, it's like some camps are really flat. Like Camp Two is the a pretty big camp and like super flat and stuff. But there's some camps like Camp Three is like, yeah, not a nice camp. Camp Four is pretty flat, but it's just like so exposed, and it's such a high elevation. The winds are always just like battering it. So yeah, camps are sometimes nice and sometimes really rough.
and like for the tents, you're bringing your own tent to that location, and then you have to do the full setup. I'm assuming you're like at least somewhat clipping the tent into the ground as well as you can because of the high winds and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Is that kind of what happens per spot?
It kind of depends. So on Everest, we actually never had to set up a tent because since we were with like a guide group, like we were under the same guide group as a lot of like different clients. So the people at like the beginning of the season like set up these tents, and then whoever's like going through just uses them, like they
Okay.
just stay there.
Okay.
But then sometimes like if there's too many people going up, and especially like this happens like on the summit push where like so many people are going up, sometimes there's not enough tents up there for the people going up. So in that case, then hopefully you find a tent and you can bring it up yourself. um so, and or sometimes I've gotten up to a camp and Mingwen was like, I don't know if there's a place for us. Like, we might have to go back down. So sometimes you're sleeping in a tent and you get random people trying to like get in your tent because there's no other spot and they're
Oh
like,
my God.
let me in, please. Like,
Wow.
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But then other mountains like Denali, like that's a completely like you have your stuff and you bring it up, like you're carrying it up, but no one else would be like, let me in your tent. Like it's a very much like your own gear.
Okay.
It just kind of depends on the mountains. Like a lot of different mountain ranges have like different norms, and just like yeah, what is normal. So it's kind of interesting.
Okay. And so that there was no regulation of how many people could summit Everest within that 4 day time span. It was just like, go ahead.
No, yeah, it was like, when people hear there's a good weather window, like you don't know if there's going to be another good weather window the whole year. So if you hear that and you're ready to go up, like yeah, you're going up.
So what, like, are we looking at like a couple hundred people that you're hiking with at the same time, or like how many people are in like your section of every single hike within this whole summit?
Yeah, good question. I think summiting, I don't have an exact number, but I think around 150 people summited the same day as me. So yeah, and I bet, you know, I if I had to guess, I'd say maybe like 250 summited that whole year. So like it's like over like that first summit window, that's like over half of the people that are going to summit that entire year. And you get more spread out. Like some people like we skip camp one, some people don't skip camp one, or some people like skip a different camp, something like that. So like you're sometimes people it's not like all 150 at the same time going,
Okay.
but like on summit day, that's why you get those like lines sometimes, is because all 150 people are going like pretty much at the same time and like, trying to go to the same place. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
when you notice how many people are up there.
And then for the summiting itself, is that necessarily, you said it wasn't like the hardest piece, but like mentally, does that get kind of scarier because you're higher up, or is there anything that kind of changes there because, the altitude and I'm assuming you're like more exposed to wind? What does that look like, the actual like
Hmm.
summiting experience?
Yeah, the summit is I'd say for me, I think it was the hardest day, was the summit day. Like a lot of people said Kumbu Icefall, but for me, I think summit day was the hardest. And it was just the longest day,
Okay.
because you are not only like going up, but then you have to go all the way back down. And we actually went all the way back down to camp two. So it was a very long day. And also, yeah, you're a lot more exposed. It kind of depends on the mountain, but on Everest, you're never really on like an exposed ridge until summit day. And that like for a lot of that day, you're on like a very exposed ridge. So it is, yeah, a little bit more of that like fear factor. And the winds, yeah, a lot more exposed to the winds because you're on that ridge. Um, so that, yeah, it's difficult. And it's just like a very steep section. Like the whole day is pretty much super steep, and there's not a lot of places to stop. Like we we were about 8 hours from like to get to the summit from camp, and we stopped one time to like drink water, and I ate like two gummies, and then we were off again. Like it was, yeah, it's a grind. It's not like a easy stoppable, route. It's a very exposed, decently technical, not as technical as the Kumbu Icefall, but there's like sections where it's like exposed and technical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're like sleep deprived, you haven't had a lot of food, you're towards the end of a journey, and it's just kind of that like final push. And so have you seen people or at least heard of it to where they just like crumble and like just couldn't summit? Is that like kind of a consistent thing that happens to people, or is it usually like, hey, I've gotten this far, we're gonna top this out?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that get to summit day and don't summit. I've seen it a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd say like yeah, the main two places people turn around are like Khumbu Icefall and Summit Day on Everest. And yeah, it could be for a lot of reasons, like the cold, like yeah, you have that oxygen mask on, so sometimes like there's problems with that, like
Mm.
it freezing or something like that. And then just exhaustion. Like, yeah, you're sleep deprived, you've been on the mountain for a long time. And there's definitely, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that like do that really tough it out. Like, I have a friend who got like, he doesn't have two of his fingers now because he had such bad frostbite and he just
Oh,
like wanted to summit so badly. So that's one of those things where it's like, is it worth it? And everyone has to kind of decide, what they're willing to sacrifice. Like a few fingers, the summit, like it's just something everyone has to decide. Maybe that's worth it. Maybe it's not.
yeah. And what was like were you getting a consistent night of sleep or like an hour or two, or you just kind of awake the whole time just trying to get a few minutes or an hour of sleep?
On summit day, it's rough. On other days, you still are getting up really early, especially going through Khumbu. I think we got up around like 2 a.m. But summit days like the most like the fewest hours of sleep you will get. And I think we got up early and tried to get to camp early, so that we'd have a lot of time to like rest and recover. So I think we got to camp around like noon. Because going from camp 3 to camp 4 is a pretty quick. It's not super difficult. So yeah, so that probably we got there around noon, and then tried to like relax, and I think I tried to sleep at like 4 or 5, and like probably didn't go to sleep till like 6, so maybe like 3 hours type of thing. Not much.
Yeah. So you finished this whole journey. You're able to kind of slap that on your resume, youngest American woman to summit Everest. What did you feel like you gained from doing that personally? What did you gain?
Hmm, that's a good question. Um, I mean the experience, the technical skills I gained was so much. Like I had never done a mountain like as technical like the Khumbu Icefall, like things like that. I just had never experienced. As well as the length of the expedition. Like that was a very long expedition. And I'd never been to the Himalayas before and like seen that culture of just so many like climbing 8,000 meters has become like a thing. Like it's like a trend now. And there's like a lot of like very like there's such a small community of mountaineers that do it. Like it was so cool to like see that community and like be a part of it. And I feel like I really became more of a part of it on K2 because I had so much time at base camp just like sitting around getting to know people. On Everest it was very like boom boom like we're going because we had great weather. But yeah, like I had never been in a base camp where, you have like that cook tent and you're just like sitting and like, getting to know people and stuff. And it was a very cool culture. I'd never been in Asia before that. So I got to like experience like just a completely like new ways of thinking and everything. And that was just like super life changing. And I really love that culture. Like I want to go back to the Himalayas so badly. It's an amazing place. And just like the how kind everyone is. Like the Sherpas are just such amazingly kind people. And it did really like change my perspective on mountaineering. But K2 I'd say changed it even more just because there was like a big accident on K2 when I was up there, where it created a lot of controversy in the mountaineering world, like a lot. It basically like someone died up there, and a lot of people like walked over his body to get to the summit. And yeah, it was a really tragic thing. And like right before that, me and my group had turned around because of an avalanche that we had been in. So luckily I didn't have to like make that decision, but yeah, it was kind of like very like kind of change it changed me a lot, and that's why I've been since then I've been like doing more like medical courses and avalanche courses and things like that, just because I'm like, you almost feel like there's other people who like who are protecting you, like the Sherpas are experts, things like that. And then I realized in that moment, like, I don't know, I feel like I need to protect myself, like not everyone has it together,
Yeah.
um so that's what I've been kind of trying to do, and also kind of transitioning to get those more like technical skills, where I can like be self-sufficient in the mountains and not like relying on other people as much.
Sweet. And then just to kind of just top this off and end the podcast, what would be your kind of like quick at the bar spiel of why would you tell someone to start their journey in mountaineering?
Hmm. I'd say you have to love the mountains. I know a lot of people who kind of do it for like the records and kind of do it for I don't know, like almost like the fame that can come with it, which is a great benefit. Like it's something that people should be proud of and should get recognition for because it's amazing feats. But honestly, like at the end of the day, there's gonna be mountains that just say no, that the weather's bad, like things happen like avalanches that you can't control, and you're not going to be able to summit. And if you are just doing it for the summit, that's going to be you're so upsetting, so draining. Like you're going to almost like be like angry at the mountains for that, because it does take a lot of time and effort and energy and money to like climb these mountains. So if you're just doing it for the summit, if that's your goal, I don't think it wouldn't be worth it if you had to turn around. But like kind of finding the peace and the joy in the actual climbing, like that being your goal is just like to push your limits and like see what you can do. When that becomes your goal, like it doesn't really matter if you make it to the top or not. It's more about like that personal journey. And yeah, I'd say like that's, if you have that mindset, like you're gonna love the mountains. If you love the outdoors, if you love adventure, and you have that mindset of like really having good values of why you're there, like it's the place for you for sure. And I think people can find adventure in a lot of areas of life. And there's tons of opportunity for it if you're really willing to like look hard and go after it. So I definitely encourage that. I think we all need some adventure in our lives.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm
Yeah,
excited
of
to
course.
keep following your journey and seeing where you go. And we'll be rooting for you on ground level over here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was awesome talking with you.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll chat soon.
Sounds good. Perfect.